the R.M.Williams Outback podcast, bringing to life the characters that feature in Outback magazine and more.
Hello listeners, great to have you back for another episode. I'm Terry Cowley, Outback's Senior Associate Editor. You'll soon meet West Australian eye surgeon Dr Angus Turner, who has the goal of eliminating preventable blindness across Australia, starting with remote communities that often currently don't get the eye care they need. As always, this interview is inspired by the stories published by our team. If you would like to know more, please go to outbackmag.com.au. Professor Angus Turner has dedicated his life to bringing world-class eye care to some of Western Australia's most remote communities. Angus's story appears in issue 167 of Outback magazine as a bit of a teaser to one of our other publications, Great Australians, where a longer version will run. Great Australians, by the way, is on sale in June. Thanks so much for joining me, Angus.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Terry. Thanks for having me.
Angus, you are a Broome-based ophthalmologist and you regularly traversed Western Australia's far north by air, coordinating an extraordinary team delivering specialist eye care to people who would otherwise go without. What is it like to be regularly flying over this incredible area of Australia?
Oh, it's a spectacular privilege to be able to fly to work and to see patients where they live. It's really rewarding to actually make it to the communities as a specialist. And for many decades, we know that turning up where people are is much better for access and much better for patient trust and continuity of their care. So for the flying aspect, I'm just overjoyed to jump in a plane. I don't actually fly it myself, but I get to see the beautiful scenery on the way to work.
The distances are extreme, the logistics relentless, but I'm guessing it's clearly very rewarding for you.
Yes, I've been passionate about eye care for a long time, since I was basically at high school, but it's taken quite a journey to get the training required and also a bit of a journey to get a regional eye hub in the Kimberley. Broome is a lovely little town. If you've managed to make it, you know that the airport is right in the centre of town. It's quite a feature. And the clinic where I work is 300 metres from the airport. So there's a real connection there to get around. And tomorrow, for example, I'm flying off to Derby and a Fitzroy Crossing circuit. And it's part of our weekly rhythm.
Let's wind back the years a bit now to your backstory. You were born in rural South Africa. I can detect a slight accent there. Your journey to eye surgeon began long ago, following in the footsteps of your maternal grandfather, Donald Girdwood. Tell me about him.
Yes, I grew up in a country town. It was in a place called Natal, and it was a couple of hours from a big city. And my dad was a country GP there, actually. It was my mum's dad, who was Donald Girdwood. And I was absolutely inspired on our family holidays. He spent his whole career in a rural country town, long way from where we lived. But when we did stay there, one of the features of that era of practice was that your patients came to your back door. And as the only GP in town, they came any hour. And he also went out to some communities on the outskirts. And he was just an amazingly patient man, always good-humoured and gentle. And I think the idea of gruff surgeons and that sort of doctor never appealed, whereas my grandfather was a really good example of a caring, compassionate doctor who really thought about the whole community. He was the only GP there.
So you were just 9 years old when your father decided to move the family to Australia, but obviously these early memories endured.
Absolutely. It's early memories because he used to sit there with a blue journal, which probably was one of the few medical journals, and he just sat there reading this as his bedtime medical interest. He was a bit obsessed, I guess. Then we went back on holidays, and it was during those times as a teenager, I actually delved into his recorded history of his own father and his grandfather. And he actually recorded that history very well and was quite good on typing. So I learned my typewriter skills when I was a young teenager with him. and read all his diaries and histories.
So your family moved between, when they came to Australia, moved between Perth and Tasmania, eventually settling back in Western Australia. And by then your trajectory was already forming and ophthalmology became the goal. Tell me about that pivotal Year 10 science class.
It's funny how certain days just stick in the memory, and that one is one of them for me. It was just a normal science class, Year 10, and we were asked to do some dissecting of an ox eye. I don't know if that's still part of the curriculum, but
possibly not.
All the kids had an ox eye, and we got to poke it, and extraordinary things happened. A little lens popped out and jelly came on the table, and then there was this retina, and I couldn't believe it. It was absolutely stunning organ that enabled us to have the precious sense that we have and sometimes take for granted, which is sight. And it was then that I sort of realized, wow, this is something that would be very cool to be involved in as a doctor one day.
That's probably not your typical reaction of a Year 10 student. I'd imagine some of them would be a bit grossed out.
Exactly. I think half the class was. I'm a bit passionate about it. And then just by coincidence, these sort of things happened. But the internet had just been introduced. In 1992, there wasn't a lot of internet going on. 1% of the world had access. So we were fortunate. And the library class was to look up something on the internet. And I ended up pursuing a few interests, which was rowing. I loved rowing as well. And then also through that popped across Oxford University, and there was a website there where you could go to the eye and vision department. And there was a funny looking professor. You could click on his head and send him an email. So that's what I did. And I said I was in Western Australia quite interested in eyes, and could I come and work for him?
I'm interested in eyes.
Yeah, I mean, ridiculous at that time. There was not quite as much spam, clearly, because he wrote back straight away and said he would love to meet me, but I would need to get into medical school and I'd need to get back in touch in about 10 years' time. So remarkably, I did go and meet the Professor Bron in Oxford, and I ended up spending 2 years there.
Wow.
And he actually remembers the story because he says it was the first day that they had a homepage. They just built it. And then on that day, in trickled a little email, and he couldn't fathom the way the internet was going to change the world.
I remember those times. It was all very exciting and new, wasn't it?
Mm.
As you say, these days you probably just hit kill if you saw it.
Yes. Ignore delete, yes. Please.
So you did graduate from medical school at the University of Western Australia and became the 5th generation of doctors in the family. That's pretty impressive.
It's a tradition that follows in a kind of vocational sense, and I think you get inspired by your family. It certainly helps to frame what you're going into. My dad certainly didn't push it. He said, surely you can think outside the box. Surely you should try something more interesting. But no, I definitely came back to it each time.
And you had a 2-year stint at Oxford University as a Rhodes Scholar. So you're obviously identified as someone super bright at university.
Well, I wouldn't say that, just super passionate. And with the Rhodes Scholarship, fortunately, it's a bit more broad, and it was an incredible opportunity that is offered to Australians and has been for so many decades, where you can get to go to Oxford and study anything you like. So I set off bright-eyed and bushy-tailed to prepare the journey towards ophthalmology.
But it wasn't exactly a straight line, was it? Because I believe you had a period of globetrotting as a member of an a cappella boy band. Now, this is just a little aside in the article, but I need to know more.
Well, that is a bit strange. But I think the thing with Oxford is that the whole experience throws anything you can imagine at each student. And there was a day at the very beginning of the year where you could go around basically picking side hobbies and activities and clubs to join. And there were about 50 choirs. And one of the choir directors was American, and he was a bit in your face, and he jumped out at me and said, "You can sing." And I said, "No, I don't think so." And he said, "Well, listen to this." And it was kind of pop and rock a cappella. And I think it's big in America for a long time, but I'd never really heard it before. And the concept of singing all the instruments with your voice was new to me. But I turned up for an audition and sang Waltzing Matilda. And they said, yep, your voice is quite low and gravelly, and we need someone in the group to do the bass guitar. And there were quite a few more auditions. And then by the time I got to the third round auditions, I said, wow, this is taking it seriously. I actually want to get in this gig now. And sure enough, it became quite a highlight of Oxford because we travel the east and west coasts of America, Europe, Edinburgh Fringe festivals. We did all sorts of performing, and it was an incredible experience on the side of pursuing eye surgery plans.
What was the name of the band?
It's called Out of the Blue. And this American chap had actually founded it and said, wow, there's no a cappella like there is in America, an all-male group. And so it was actually quite successful in Oxford and has continued to be. Every few years, the members move on and they audition the next batch. They made it onto Britain's Got Talent and had some great experiences around the world now. But at the time, it was just pure novelty and an experience.
Fantastic.
I loved it. Yeah. I was the oldest in the group, mind you. My nickname was Abuelo, which is grandfather in Spanish, because at 24, I was pretty old.
So you followed that by a visit back to South Africa's Eastern Cape, which you have described as a pivotal experience.
Yes, that was an opportunity to return to my roots where my grandfather had been and do some eye surgery. And this time, the nice full circle was that it was with the Fred Hollows Foundation from Australia, going back as a young eye surgeon. And it was a really interesting, very remote location where the surgery was actually quite different. And I had to adapt techniques that we don't actually do in Australia very often. But in India and China and other places, the technique has evolved and it's extremely good eye surgery. There's no difference in the quality of the eye care once you measure it. It just doesn't have the same expensive machines. So that was a fantastic learning personally, so that when I came to the Outback, I was armed with some surgical techniques that could stand me in good stead when things were tough, but also working in communities where the patients were lining up for surgery for days and at quite high volumes, and seeing the good work that can be done all over the world, but also realizing that actually in our own backyard in Western Australia, we had vast reaches of land with very limited access to eye surgery. So I didn't have to go too far to do similar work in our own country.
And you were really kind of struck by the disparities and the poverty and how, that was, as you say, happening in your own backyard.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing with eyes is it's a good surgical experience for the patient because the patient's wide awake, there's no sedation needed, and the operation can take about 10 minutes and really restore sight from nothing and blindness. And so it's an incredibly effective medical intervention, if you like. And where it is not accessible is actually, it's not easily fixed because anything requires a lot of improvement of the supply of the workforce. But it's a quick win, if you like, and that those patients can get back to their families, they can get back to the workforce, and they don't require care from someone else in the family, another person who's out of a job now.
And I think most Australians do have a very simple understanding of that, courtesy of Fred Hollows and the ads that used to come into our living rooms. I think a lot of the work he did places like Ethiopia and Eritrea, where he was, there was vision that we all saw. I certainly did growing up of people's sight being restored with simple operations. Did you mention Fred Hollows Foundation? Did you ever have an opportunity to meet him?
No, I didn't. I know his wife, Gabby Hollows, well, and the Fred Hollows Foundation has been a wonderful supporter of our work for our entire Lions Outback Vision journey. So that's been a real strong foundational part of our fundraising. And so we continue to work alongside Fred Hollows Foundation.
So after completing your specialist training in Melbourne, you returned west to Fremantle Hospital, putting your hand up for every Outback visit you could. And I think you started to really join the dots about how, you mentioned it earlier, how important that constant presence is in patients' lives and for communities.
Yeah, I think something that struck me perhaps most in the Aboriginal health setting and in the Aboriginal communities was how strong the sense of trust needs to be to come into a Western healthcare setting. Kind of was even more pronounced than it was in South Africa or in India and other places that I've worked, where there's an acknowledgement that the health systems just have large volumes and you line up for treatment. But in Australia, investing in being present, turning up to the same communities makes a really big impact. And the patients are so warm and responsive once you've come back a few times. And then the relationship really builds up. Actually, through quite a lot of the whole community, the word can spread. So it's helped with access in the West Australian communities. And therefore, I've often joined forces or been very careful to link up with key community members. And often that might be an optometrist who knows the community much better than I did, or the Aboriginal health worker who has been around for a long time and really working alongside the local heroes who are on the ground and, in my opinion, are the people that make the most difference. Once they know about eye care, they become the champion in the community. And as an eye surgeon, you can't be everywhere at once. You can really work together, and then the patients can have more trust.
Excuse my ignorance, but I'm sure I'm not the only one out there. Can you explain to me the difference between an optometrist and an ophthalmologist?
Well, it's actually a common question. So the optometrist is someone who trains in eye care specifically. You have a university degree straight out of school, or it can be postgraduate, and you learn how to fix up refractive error, which is the biggest cause of vision impairment, where you put on a pair of glasses and you can see the distance, and some people can need them for reading. So refractive error is key. But optometrists do so much more because they also can screen for diabetic eye problems, glaucoma, and these things that are in the family or in your family you might need screened regularly. And if a condition is found that requires intervention or surgery, then the optometrist refers to the ophthalmologist, who's a specialist surgeon and has done medical school first. So that's quite a long journey, and there's not enough ophthalmologists. The optometrist is, I would say, like a general practitioner of the eye, and is a really great place to get your eyes checked.
Yeah, so it's the optometrist you're seeing at Specsavers, not the ophthalmologist.
That's right. And then the Specsavers will refer a small number of their patients who need a cataract operation or laser surgery for diabetes complications.
So when you started to do those outback visits, you were exposed to a systemic problem, which was, well, we've already touched on it, that regional specialist care is fragmented, under-resourced and poorly coordinated. And you were somewhat inspired by your own family history of remote medical practice in trying to come up with solutions to this, because obviously you would have seen your grandfather being quite innovative. He would have had to think on his feet and use whatever resources he had available.
That's right. So if you've got a big challenge or a disparity in access, you have to think outside the box. And I was in the right environment for that because I was training in Melbourne, and I finished my training, and Professor Hugh Taylor, who actually did meet Fred Hollows and worked alongside him, had just set up a new unit called the Indigenous Eye Health Unit at the University of Melbourne. And I did a year with him, kind of choose your own adventure fellowship post-training. And it was a chance to dive into the, let's say, the academic side of how to improve systems, and had this wonderful opportunity to go and travel all around Australia, from Broken Hill to back of Burke up to Queensland, you name it, Alice Springs and Darwin, and just see how ophthalmology was done in all these places and compare the current systems in terms of their outcomes and how many patients they could see, how much it costs to run, government level kind of thinking, and then put it all together in a report, and felt equipped now to come back to West Australia and say, let's try and improve the systems based on the best practice we've seen all around Australia.
So in 2011, under the banner of the world-renowned research and clinical care organisation Lions Eye Institute, you founded Lions Outback Vision. Nathan Dyer's story about you in Outback and Great Australian says it's built around the simple idea that people living in regional and remote Western Australia deserve the same standard of eye care as those in the city, and that continuity, not occasional visits, was the key. I mean, in a perfect world, of course, people living anywhere in Australia would have the same access to healthcare as in the cities, but it's not always the case, is it?
No, I mean, everyone who lives in the country knows that. It's for us now, even a recent national survey showed the number one risk factor for having blindness or vision impairment is living in the country. So our service, Outback Vision, still has a lot of work to do. And the Lions Eye Institute was a great home. It's a not-for-profit institute that was well known and was able to seek support. And the McCusker family, Malcolm and Tonya in Perth, were foundational supporters and have continued to be to create Lions Outback Vision. And the University of Western Australia came on board as well. So it was a really strong foundation. And from there, we started with a very small group of practitioners and have grown and grown to have our regional hub based in the Kimberley. We're now really keen to pursue something similar and raise support for Kalgoorlie and the Goldfields. And I think the mission of Lions Outback Vision continues because it's such a vast state. There should be 10 full-time ophthalmologists spread thinly across the whole state, but we have 2.5 million square kilometres to sort of get to where patients live. And I think the factors that the technology keeps improving, the equipment and the ways people get their eyes treated in Australia also lifts a benchmark every 5 years or 10. And so we constantly have to think, how can we offer someone as far as Fitzroy Crossing the same care as they would get if they were in Perth? And you're right, you can't have the very, very expensive equipment in every place, but you can certainly have some really good strategies to make that patient get the care they need.
So you talked about a really good foundation with your philanthropists and also the University of Western Australia. So that's enabled some really valuable long-term research.
Yeah, the research has been a really stimulating side project in a sense, but it goes hand in hand because the kind of research we do and that I'm interested in is really translated fancy scientific experiments or technology into real world results where the people are. So I'm not so interested in the theoretical. I'm glad people can do that work so that they've got the building blocks in the labs. But I'm really interested in, does it translate for patients? And so we've had a broad range of research projects going on. The most recent one has been really exciting and successful in the last year was a research competition that the West Australian government ran. And they basically said there's a $5 million prize for the group that can do something innovative with technology in the Pilbara. And the Pilbara is where I've been visiting for 15 years. And I thought I definitely need to get involved. And we'd also been doing work with Google already on AI. And AI was the buzzword quite a long time ago about surely the AI can look at our eye photographs that we have and detect problems like a human can. And of course it can. We know that now, AI is everywhere. But at the time, it was making sure that it wasn't biased and it could include Aboriginal eyes and people who were from the regions in Australia and wouldn't miss diabetic retinopathy, which is the problem you get in your eye if you have diabetes. And so every year when someone gets an eye check, the photograph has to get sent by an email somewhere and it takes a while to get checked. But the AI can do it on the spot.
So that's what's resulted from one of your research projects.
Yes, we did some research to validate AI with Google to make sure that it was effective. And that then got translated in the Pilbara as a head-to-head trial against other AI to find the best solution and make sure it works for patients. And we were very fortunate to win that competition. And so now we're using that funding in a new startup called Lions Vision. And this new startup has a real mission to actually make sure that diabetic screening in Australia is done with the help of GPs. Because GPs see half the patients that aren't getting screened. We need to see those people to get their eye check at a general practitioner. And the technology is already available, just needs to be delivered across Australia. So I'm pretty excited about this new venture.
Yeah, so this is definitely part of your work that's much broader than Western Australia.
Well, this is a new opportunity for us, having founding a new company called Lions Vision, also registering it as a charity so that it can provide free AI, enabling patients, no matter where they live, to visit a GP and have an eye photo, and the AI can give you the eye diagnosis on the spot. And that will really help prevent disease because some things are silent and they can creep up, but you can prevent them if spotted early. And that's particularly the case with glaucoma and diabetes.
Amazing. So tell me about this mobile specialist hub. Rather than spreading funding thinly across multiple regional hospitals, you had an idea of a fully equipped clinic on wheels.
Yes, we call that the Lions Outback Vision van. It's quite a big van. It's a semi-trailer with a big prime mover, and it has 3 consulting rooms. And the reason we got that project together, it's been 10 years now. It's been going around the state, doing about 25,000 kilometers each year. The reason we have a mobile clinic is that the technology and the equipment had really changed for what's available in each outreach post, in each hospital. And so we needed about $500,000 of equipment in 20 different places, and fundraising that seemed unrealistic. So we managed to get the equipment put into a purpose-built truck that could get to the towns 3 times a year, and the patients could have access to the equivalent amazing state-of-the-art technology that's available in the city. And 10 years on, it's still going strong. It's in the Western Desert at the moment. It's all connected with ability for remote supervision, and patients can be seen by the specialist on board and interact with other specialists. And we can do lasers and injections and different treatments on there. So it's been a wonderful service and has had support from amazing philanthropists to make it possible, and continues to be supported now by the West Australian government.
This was on the road in 2016 first up, and I believe it was around about the same time you met your now wife, Kara, although she was an aspiring actor and chef who also grew up in South Africa. So I guess you had heard an instant connection over that. So you got married and then you dragged the poor woman out in your vision van.
Yeah, I mean, we weren't dating for very long, bit of a whirlwind romance. I'd been a bachelor out in the bush for too long, obviously. And I met her and we clicked. And a couple of months later, we were engaged. And she had aspired to be an actress in the big smoke somewhere in New York or Paris or London. But anyway, we got out to the desert communities. And she's a very talented chef as well, and has done some training in hospitality and also acting. So the two came together, and she was able to really contribute to the ideas of food, healthy eating, and preventing eye problems in the first place, since diabetes is our main eye problem that we're dealing with in the regions.
What was that time like when you first headed out with the vision van?
Oh, it's a very exciting time, isn't it? When something's very new, and living or having my wife along the journey, and she was part of the team, was exciting. It's not sustainable for the long run, but we have a really good model now where the doctors and the team can work in the rosters and are supported on the van. But fond memories of that period of time when it was all new.
And you now have 3 children. How do you juggle all of this now?
Yeah, 3 little girls. They are now 7, 5 and 3. So it's actually a pretty precious age when they all sort of just absolutely love everything that we do.
Yes, enjoy that.
No, I can definitely tell it's a special period of time. And my wife actually trained as a teacher as well. So we're on the road a lot and actually do move quite a bit here and there. So homeschooling's worked out for us at the moment, and we'll have to re-enter orbit and get back into school at some point. But the girls are loving it, and there's plenty of community members to meet and socialise along the way.
So what does the work of Lions Outback Vision look like today? Obviously working closely with First Nations, Aboriginal Medical Services, you've got the vision van travelling around, and you've got support from specialists in various locations.
Well, there's still a lot of work to do. Like I mentioned, a recent survey showed that half the patients in Australia who were supposed to have a screen for diabetes have missed out. So we really want to increase the prevention side screening, and that means working with GPs and optometrists. And so collaborative care, where we actually don't duplicate our efforts and waste time, but we work smart together. We need to make sure we're seeing the right patient at the right place. So when we fly up, as I am tomorrow, to Derby, the surgery is all kind of lined up. The patients have been seen in the communities by an optometrist, and they've already had a telehealth appointment where I've gone through the operation and explained it, and then I basically meet the patient on the day of surgery. So we eliminate the waiting times that are involved in normal referral pathways just to see the specialist and have a chat. By the time you waited all that time just to have a chat, you might as well get on with the surgery. So it's a really efficient model. It can definitely be improved. I think it can also be translated to other parts of Australia. So my advocacy work more nationally is to basically communicate with other regions and offer support where possible as to how models can work best for each region. And, just like my dad was an overseas trained doctor when he came here and had long barriers, a couple of years of really difficult times, despite the desperate need in the country regions back then, just like today, we've still got a lot to work on in that respect as well, because there's still lots of bottlenecks and barriers to getting health professionals to the country areas.
I'm going to ask you what you see as your end game. Maybe that's not the right expression. There can always be more services and people can always have better health, but where would you like to get sort of in 10 years? And I'm guessing these sort of AI tools and various other technologies we may not have even thought of yet are going to continue to play a bigger and bigger role.
Yeah, well, to be on the front foot, to harness those opportunities and ensure they are translated well and safely for patients in our country towns, and also to have a model that is really sustainable in terms of succession, and also realizing that it's part of training future generations. So we have registrars currently in Broome with me and coming on these trips who are learning to do surgery. We have overseas trained doctors also part of the pathway, and working with optometry to make sure those models are just the right mode. It doesn't take special effort to see patients efficiently. So in 10 years' time, I'd love to say that I'm definitely out of the equation. I'm not required because there's such a pipeline of good trainees and we have wonderful junior doctors being trained up, and that we actually can meet the workforce needs in eye care. And I think you're right, 10 years is the time that should all be achievable.
And this might seem like a really obvious question, but I still would like to hear it in your own words. Why is this kind of eye care so important?
I think anyone listening will know either of their own experience losing sight and how scary that is, or of a relative. And some people really freak out with the thought of an eye injection or a treatment or putting a contact lens in. But it's really just about how much we can value and appreciate the precious sense of sight and what enjoyment and joy it gives for life. But in particular, being able to drive a car or have a job in the regions is essential for many people. And if you can't do that because of vision, that could have been prevented. We just need to eliminate preventable blindness, essentially. And I think that's achievable in a country with our resources. The goodwill we have from philanthropy, demonstrating and connecting to government funding, means that we should really be able to achieve that in our nation. Our population is not endless and massive in the billions. It's in the millions, and we can do this.
2 decades after your first supervised operation, and writer Nathan Dyer said that you remain in awe of the work itself.
Yes, I mean, it's hard to describe eye surgery unless you've actually been there. Most places, I guess, people are given something to make them sleepy and forget a bit. But in the country surgery we do, there isn't sedation most of the time. And the patient is awake for that 10 minutes and I'm sitting right close to their eye with, I guess, a knife and another little instrument in the eye. And my feet are on a joystick and another foot pedals, driving microscopes and having a chat to the patient about where they come from and how they ended up here on the table. And it's just phenomenal that amazing surgeons have invented all these things in the past. I'm in awe of some of the pioneering medical technology that's made this possible. And then the fact that I get to use it on a daily basis where the patient and I are in this very intimate moment, in a sense, as a surgeon. They're not asleep. You can't chat about anything you want because the patient's right there. And then at the end of it, they can see straight away because the anesthetic is just some drops. The drops make the eye numb and that's enough. So it's extraordinary to see someone, open their eye after all that water and things have been on it and go, gee, I can see already. And that's really, really exciting.
If we were allowed to use music in podcasts, which we're not for all sorts of copyright reasons, I now sort of queue up. I can see clearly now that song. And we could fade that out in the background, but we can't do that.
Oh, what a shame.
I guess I could just finish up by saying thank you for the work that you do. It just sounds amazing, and I really do hope that you achieve your goal in 10 years or however long it takes of eliminating preventable blindness, because I think that's that word preventable is key, isn't it? There's a lot of things we can't maybe fix, but if we can fix these preventable sight problems, it's going to make a huge difference for so many communities, in particular many of our Indigenous communities.
Absolutely, and thank you. It'd be great to be able to share a story, but to reiterate is so much teamwork involved. And I've mentioned optometrists and I've mentioned surgeons and doctors, but to get the patient there is actually a team effort from family members through administration and receptionists. And the barriers are endless. So if you only think of the surgeon end of it, it just doesn't happen. And in Lions Outback Vision, our team go way beyond the call of duty to home visit, meet patients where they are, the Aboriginal health workers and the receptionists on the phone. And I think investing in that front end has made our team a really happy place to work, because we can all make sure the patient gets the best outcome.
Angus, if people want to know more about Lions Outback Vision, maybe they even want to make a donation, where should they go?
Oh, that would be amazing. And I think the best place to go would be to the Lions Outback Vision website, which is outbackvision.com.au, or you can look up the Lions Eye Institute on Google and get in touch with Lions Outback Vision to see the work we do on the web. Happy to communicate more about what we do if you're interested. And if you live in Western Australia, I hope to see you on the road.
Thanks so much for being my guest today, Angus.
Thanks, Terry, for having me.
Hi, Terry back with you. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Dr. Angus Turner. What a great example he is of one of the many unsung heroes in remote locations across our country, doing amazing work to make it better. As I said, his story is in issue 167 of Outback magazine and also our biannual Great Australians magazine, out in June 2026. Don't forget to give the podcast a follow if you liked this episode, and do us a favour and tell a friend. The R.M.Williams Outback podcast is hosted and produced by me, Terry Cowley. Editor-in-chief is Mark Muller. Original theme music by Isaac May.